Did I scare you? We all know that the Panasonic S5 is all the rage right now because of its capabilities, size, and price. People are saying, including myself, that it is essentially a mini S1H. Since it is basically a mini S1H, what is different about the two cameras then? Well, surprise, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the difference between these two cameras, and hopefully by the end, it'll be easier for you to decide which camera is right for you. Just to remind you, since it's been a minute, my name's Dustin, your video tour guide, and remember to keep your arms and legs inside your chairs at all times. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Where'd I go? Real quick, if you want to hang out with me and get to know me on a more personal level, feel free to follow me on Twitch, or if you like this community, be sure to check out my Discord channel. There are links to both in the description. So the first difference I'm going to talk about between these two cameras is the ergonomics. The first thing I'm sure you'll notice looking at these two cameras side by side is the size. The S1H is much bigger than the S5. For some people, this could be a good thing, and for some people, this could be a bad thing. I personally like either size, and they both have advantages and disadvantages. The S1H is bigger and heavier, which can make it kind of a pain to shoot with all day if it's on a gimbal, but I do like having somewhat of a weight to the camera because, for one, it makes it easier to make handheld shots look more natural, if that makes sense, and it just makes it easier to grip the camera. But on the flip side, the S1H is harder to fit more easily in my bag compared to the S5 and can be kind of a pain to lug around. Another disadvantage to the smaller size is there are less places to put buttons. For example, the S5 has no lock lever, no record button on the front, only one custom button on the front, and no LCD screen on the top. It's also missing a flash synchro socket for timecode sync. There's no fan to help with heat, no flippy tilty screen. Keep in mind, it flips out, but it won't tilt unless it's flipped out, whereas the S1H can tilt without flipping out the screen. And it has a micro HDMI instead of an HDMI that the S1H has. It also has two of these wheels on the camera as opposed to the S1H design where it has a stacked wheel on one side. A lot of these aren't deal breakers, but as you'll see in a minute, some of these features that I mentioned that are missing on the S5 could be a deal breaker for some. For me, having used both, having less buttons is just a small inconvenience. When I was shooting the Come With Me music video with the S5, I did miss having the record button on the front. For one shot, the camera was super high up on the C-stand, and it was just more difficult to reach the record button. Oh, and I'm telling you, once you have used the flippy tilty screen that is on the S1H, it's hard to even go back to just a flippy screen that the S5 has. It's just the best of both worlds. Personally, I haven't used the lock lever very often, but it is still a nice option to have if you plan to use that because the S1H has it and the S5 does not have it. Let's move on to more of the settings and menu items. The second difference is the limitation of codecs and frame rates. I mentioned in one of my previous videos where I did a review on the S1H that the S5 didn't have DCI 4K. Well, because I don't own the S5, the one I used was a rental, I didn't know that Panasonic had released a firmware update adding DCI 4K, so I was wrong in that review. But once I received the S5 and took a look, I noticed that you can only shoot in 10-bit at 24 or 30 FPS. For someone who is more of a beginner, this probably won't be as big of a deal, but for me, this was one reason I upgraded from a Sony a7 III to the S1H was so I could shoot at these higher resolutions in higher bit depths and frame rates. You can shoot in Ultra HD in 10-bit slow-mo, but keep that in mind if you plan to shoot in DCI 4K at 60 FPS that it doesn't support 10-bit. Another that I noticed was that the S5 does not have 48 FPS. Now these cameras both have VFR, which stands for variable frame rate. Keep in mind though that VFR is not what I'm talking about. On the S1H, you can choose to shoot at 48 FPS in 10-bit, whereas on the S5, you'll have to choose VFR. The difference between the two is that if you are not shooting in VFR, you have to slow down your footage in post and it will record sound. Whereas in VFR mode, it will automatically slow down your footage and it won't record sound. Plus, I'm fairly certain that it also limits your footage to 8-bit instead of 10-bit. Personally, I love shooting at 48 FPS over 60 FPS because at 60 FPS, I feel like it is just a little too slow sometimes, whereas 48 FPS is the perfect sweet spot. The third difference you'll find is the anamorphic modes and codecs. I think it's awesome that the S5 even offers anamorphic modes, because when I bought the S1H originally, I didn't think it was something I was going to use. But after buying the S1H and using it for about 8 months, I wanted to step up my work and try something new, and that was when I decided to shoot some anamorphic stuff. So after shooting some anamorphic stuff, I decided I wanted to shoot the music video I shot on the S5 anamorphic as well. But I learned that I wasn't going to be able to shoot any of it in slow-mo. I wasn't going to shoot the whole thing in slow-mo, but there was a few scenes where I would have liked to have some slow-mo. More specifically, the scene where my boss is yelling at me to get some work done. That was the scene where it would have been nice to have some slow-mo. In the end, it turned out just fine without any slow-mo, but it is something to keep in mind if you plan to shoot a lot of anamorphic stuff with the S5. The fourth difference is the dual ISO. Now, both cameras have dual ISO. The biggest difference is that the S5 is always set to automatic, where with the S1H, you have the choice to choose between auto, low, and high. Personally, I pretty much just leave this on auto anyways, so then I don't have to worry about myself forgetting to change the second switch depending on what ISO I'm at. I know some people find this is a big deal, so I thought I'd include it, but for me, I don't find it that big of a deal. The fifth difference is external timecode settings. Remember how I mentioned in the beginning that the S5 does not have a flash synchro socket and the S1H does? What you can use this for is to sync timecode externally, which is extremely useful if you need to sync timecode on a bigger production or set. The S5 does not have the ability to do this. I personally have not had to use this, but I'm super glad I have it because I have been on some productions where it would have been very useful to sync timecode. And if I ever get a gig in the future where I need it, I know it'll be really easy compared to the S5. I can definitely see this being a big deal for people, so keep in mind that the S5 does not have external timecode settings. The sixth difference, which I was very surprised to see, and maybe I missed something, but I'm fairly certain that the S5 does not have loop recording, segmented file recording, focus transition, or timestamp recording. Loop recording allows you to switch recording from one card to another once one fills up, and then you can hot swap that card so you can record indefinitely. Segmented file recording will split your recordings into 1-minute increments so you can avoid a very long recording from getting corrupt. Focus transition is basically a way for you to set keyframes and perform a focus pull. And timestamp recording, I don't think I've talked about it before, but it's a way that you can bake into your footage the time and date of whatever you're recording. Like I said, I was super surprised to not see these on the S5, unless I just missed them somehow, but they can be very useful in a lot of different scenarios. If they do exist on the S5, please let me know down in the comments. Now this one, I'm fairly certain is correct, but let me know in the comments with a source if I am wrong. Number 7 is, I'm pretty sure the S5 has less stops of IBIS compared to the S1H. Now they both can achieve up to 6.5 stops of shake, but only if you are using a lens with OIS, optical image stabilization. They both have a 5-axis image stabilizer, but the S5 is only 5-stop rated, whereas the S1H is 6-stop rated. I read that off of B&H, and I don't know exactly what this means, but from what I could find, it means that the IBIS on the S1H works more effectively than on the S5 because the S1H has a bigger body and it has more room to let the IBIS work, whereas on the S5, smaller body, the sensor just can't move around as much. I would love to do some handheld tests side by side of this, but because of the limited time I had with the S5, I unfortunately didn't have the time. On paper though, this can be a big deal because not everyone will be using lenses that have OIS, so to have the best possible IBIS is a big deal. The 8th difference is the S5 does not have an optical low-pass filter. Now there's some debate I've seen online about having an OLPF. Generally speaking though, the advantage to having an OLPF is that it will help with moire. Moire can be super distracting to get into your footage, especially if it's on your subject's shirt or something that's the main focus, because there's not really a way to get rid of it besides to reshoot the shot and remove whatever was giving you the moire. This is something I'd love to test side by side as well, but people also say that an OLPF can give a more filmic look compared to no OLPF. Some will also say it makes your image look too soft, And so basically what it comes down to is preference. Personally for me, when I was using the S5, I didn't see a huge difference, and I definitely have to do some side-by-side tests to really look, but those are just some things to keep in mind. The ninth difference was also surprising, in that there is no Varicam menu on the S5. On the S1H, when you hit the display button, you can change to a menu that looks like this. This can be super nice because you can see all the settings, and you can change them easily just by touching whatever setting you want to change. This is the same menu that you can see on Varicams, so that's super cool. The S5 does not have this menu. Not a huge deal for me, and I think it would be easy to add on a firmware update, but it was surprising also to not see this. The last and final difference is a big deal to me. There is no unlimited recording on the S5 unless you are shooting in 8-bit. Now, it isn't super often that I have to record for more than 30 minutes. But for long interviews, I think still being able to shoot indefinitely in any mode is a big advantage. Especially if I'm shooting some kind of documentary or short film, I think you're going to want to shoot in 10-bit. Which also reminds me that the S5 does not have the ability to shoot in 6K internally. I'm pretty sure you can record it externally with a Ninja or something like that. But the S1H can shoot 6K open gate internally, which I have actually utilized a lot, and I think it's a nice option to have, especially with things moving more towards 4K becoming the standard. It's nice to shoot in 6K and have the option to punch in and not lose any kind of quality. There you have it, 10 big differences between the S5 and the S1H. So which should you buy? I think it's kind of straightforward. The S5 really is a mini S1H, but that also means it has less than what the S1H has to offer. The S1H is suited better for a more professional environment over the S5. So if you're going to be in a more professional environment, it might be better to go with the S1H. If you are shooting more run and gun and those features I mentioned aren't needed, then the S5 is a killer value because, bonus secret I guess, the S5 is basically half the price of the S1H. Either way though, you can't go wrong with either camera. I hope this video was helpful. Be sure to check out my Discord or live stream if you want to talk to me more personally, or if you have any questions. You can also check the links in the description if you want to support me, but you can also support me by hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified of future uploads. In the meantime though, happy filming.